Let's talk organ donation from the perspective of a living kidney. The phase of recovery that I want to talk about today goes from pretty much 3 days after your surgery to the 8-week mark. This is the time period when you go from really feeling like you had an organ removed to feeling like yourself again. The big picture restrictions really for medical care in this period is one, for 2 to 3 weeks, you won't be able to drive. For about 3 weeks, you should not soak in a bathtub, go swimming, or use a hot tub or anything like that. You want to keep your incision site dry. You're able to wean yourself off of any of the prescription painkillers, and that also means that you're now able to drink alcohol in moderation as you need. And I never had problems with that, just stayed hydrated. I usually have like a nightcap every evening, and none of the staff had any concerns about that. So I just make sure to have a bottle of water afterwards before going to bed. At the 6-week mark, you're going to be allowed to lift over 10 pounds. I would say make sure to understand that that's just a single point in a line of ramping up back to regular activity. And so it's not as though at the 6-week mark you're now free to do any heavy weightlifting, even though you're not breaking a certain rule. I certainly was still able to accidentally re-aggravate my incision site at that point in time. So the 2 to 3 week mark, depending on your transplant team and doctors, the 2 to 3 week mark, they'll say you're allowed to drive again. What they're really worried about is, one, that you're off all those heavy duty painkillers and so you've got your full cognition back, and then two, that your muscles are healed enough that your reaction time is safe enough for you to drive. Come on. Good girl. So my overall timeline was 3 days in the hospital right after surgery, another 3 days in a hotel nearby. On the 6th day, took the 4-hour car ride home, which was pretty tough. My second week, even though I was getting much more independent, my pain really diminished. It still really helped to have someone stay at home all day with me to help do chores, kind of cook and clean and help me out of bed. By the end of the second week, I was both walking much longer distances, probably getting up to 5 miles a day, and I was able to roll out of bed without help because I still wasn't able to do any kind of crunch or like sit up motion. Weeks 3 and 4, I really started feeling better. Certainly regained a lot of strength, absolutely had no problems taking deep breaths like I did before. Just when I went on those longer walks, every now and then I'd end up with quite a stitch in my side right around my incision site. Weeks 5 through 8, really that second month, on the whole, I was really very functional. I kept accidentally injuring myself by pushing the boundaries of that weight restriction, and every time I did that, it would set me back several days. So that factor really was what kept me from going back to work. The soreness really kept on moving from a full body soreness just as a result of the surgery to really localized pain and feeling like I had a stitch in my side as though I'd been running. That pain diminished really around week 4 and 5. I could forget a lot of the time that I'd had surgery, but that was also the time that I would start accidentally hurting myself because I'd push it too far. They will warn you that you may have pink colored urine for a little bit, and that's just traces of blood from the surgery. I had that for right around 11 days, and they told me that it'll go away in 10 to 14. Those first few days in the hotel, you're still not feeling so great, but finally my bloating went way down and my appetite came back. They'd actually weighed me in at the hospital at over 20 pounds over my pre-surgery weight, and that's despite not eating anything and having an organ removed. So be prepared for that. Bring a loose set of sweatpants. As the bloating went down, I started feeling more comfortable, but the pain was still localized to my side, and again, couldn't get up out of bed on my own. Had to swap between sitting and laying down. I did do some really light stretching exercises and continued to use that incentive spirometer, although I could feel every day my breathing getting easier and easier. So on day 6, I took the car ride home. It was about 4 hours. It was really pretty rough. People online had complained about the bumps in the road, but for me, it was really just a matter of using those core muscles to brace myself while I was sitting, even though I didn't want to. You still aren't fully relaxed. And so that long amount of exercise of those stabilizing muscles, that was pretty aggravating. And by the time I got home, I was extremely fatigued. I would not recommend trying to take a long car ride before maybe the 5-day mark. And if you do, you might have to really load up on the painkillers. The second week home, I really felt like I turned a corner. Every single day I felt better and better. Bloating was gone. I was able to walk pretty much like 2.5 miles at the start of the second week and up to 5 miles a day by the end of the second week. It was at that time that I fully went off painkillers. They had given me a prescription of oxycodone and a stool softener for when I went home, but the oxy was giving me a bad headache, and I stopped both of them by day 7, and then day 8 it was just Tylenol, and after that I actually didn't need painkillers. Every now and then I'd take a Tylenol if I had really aggravated my side, but on the whole I was feeling really good by the end of that second week. You're still figuring out how your body's able to move. So I couldn't do chores like laundry or cooking or cleaning, anything like that. And so it really helped that one of my aunts came and helped me through that second week. And it meant a lot just to have someone that you can talk to about any of the weird pains you're feeling. She was able to keep an eye on the incision site a little better than I could because I couldn't twist so well. And, just someone to go on walks with you and help you with day-to-day chores. So if you've got a really cool aunt like I do, then see if they are able to stay with you for that second week. Right from the get-go looked really good. It looked as though someone just took a red marker and drew a line on my side. And it was covered in, I think, the same material that they use to bandage tattoos, where it's like a clear film that runs about an inch or inch and a half around the outside border of the incision. This bandage falls off on its own. For me, it was as I showered and dried off, I would notice the ends would curl up a little bit more, and you're free to clip off any of the peeling bits that come up on their own, but you don't want to actively peel up any of the bandage. I had no problems whatsoever with the scar. I just thought it looked really cool from the get-go. You are allowed to take a shower pretty much as soon as you're comfortable after surgery. I didn't want to try and take a shower in the hospital because should there be an event or I fall down or something, I didn't want that to happen while I was in a hospital. I would rather do that in a hotel and sort it out on my own. So I waited until the 4th day. Really, the only difficult part was I couldn't raise my right arm very well, so I had to go really slow when it came to washing my hair. I was worried that it would sting or singe to have water running on my incision, but it didn't hurt at all. When I woke up, one of the things that I noticed too was that usually my sides are relatively straight, but right at the point, if the incision was on my right side about here, I noticed that there was kind of a lip, but not like a thin one. It was like clearly fat or muscular tissue kind of bulging out above the incision site. At first I was really worried, is this permanent? Is this going to go away on its own? Let's see what happens. So sure enough, it reduced all on its own, and my sides are completely straight again. But when at those times that I would re-aggravate the incision, I would notice the swelling would come right back. So I assume that's just the muscles healing up. Over the course of my second month of recovery, I would accidentally re-aggravate my incision site. The few things I did, I tried to play Beat Saber, the virtual reality game, and that was, even though it's not a heavily weighted activity, it was still far too much, and I would get really sore. The other one was I helped my husband get a TV out of our car, and even though I was taking a supportive role, it was still more exertion than my side needed. And then the other one was that once I was finally out of that soak time boundary, I went to the Detroit Schwitz with a friend and ended up like they have this really cold plunge pool, and so I ended up clinging to the side for a second, and that action alone, where I was pushing downwards with my arm, that re-aggravated my lats. Those were the three instances that really kept me from going back to work because it would take several days to recover from the new injury. I was allowed to choose between 1 to 8 weeks in time after surgery to have my post-op appointment. I chose to have it at about the 3 week mark because even though it would have been convenient to just stay in the area and have it done that first week, should anything crop up, I wanted to have a later kind of checkup time. So I had picked the 3 week mark. I could drive on my own at that point in time. And that post-op visit, really, they're just going to check your blood and urine levels again, check your incision site to make sure you're healing well. Luckily for me, they also coordinated me to meet my recipient at that point in time, which was fantastic. All I can say is that he is a 17-year-old boy. He seemed to be doing pretty well at the time that I met him and his family, and he's a really good kid. So it was really cool. Also, at my 3 week checkup, I asked one of the doctors, is there anything in particular that I should put on the incision to help it heal better? And the doctor said, well, you could put some aloe gel on it if you want. I was already really pleased with how my incision was healing at that time, so I just left it clean and dry, and it's healed wonderfully. As far as going back to work, if you have a very flexible schedule, you can work from home, and it's an office type job. I think week 3, you could probably start ramping up your work again. By week 4, you could probably go back to an office again if you've got a flexible schedule that will let you leave if you need to rest, and that you're not doing a whole lot of physical activity. So I waited really until the 6 week mark before I started working a little bit from home. And then 8 weeks before I returned to the office, I had a really heavy backpack and a long walk from the parking lot to my desk space, and so I wasn't comfortable going in before then. Luckily for me, I work for General Motors, and they had a really great short-term disability policy specifically for organ donation as well. So check your company's policies if you can, because there may be some help out there that you didn't expect. Really, by the 8 week mark, physically I was feeling really normal. The only difference was my cardio capacity was a little bit diminished, and that's just from having such a long break from doing significant exercise. And then also I couldn't do a real pull-up anymore, and that took another couple months before my side had really fully regrown and I'd done the training to get back to it. So again, please leave any questions that you've got down below in the comments, or you can find me at mobandstudio.com and send me an email if you like. If you're curious about those first 3 days right after surgery, you can check out my first video, and please stay tuned for a little bit more content about the longer term recovery, the decision to donate, and maybe the surgery day. I've got a lot of ideas for different content that might be able to help prospective donors and medical professionals that are curious about the process, and hopefully too for the potential kidney recipients that are facing those tough conversations with loved ones about the idea of becoming a kidney donor.